list on the EPA website that's a link in this document that you can click on that has more information about what to or not to use. I'm sure a lot of you are kind of educated on that anyway, as far as what is safe to use around kids in general, even before this happened. But there's a lot of good resources on our website as well as on other websites online for the EPA. General hygiene. So when thinking about hand washing, they recommend hand washing, as I mentioned earlier, or as a secondary sanitizer. How can you make it fun? Whenever I think of with my sons or any of their friends, and I want them to do something that they may not want to do, how can I make it fun? How can I make it competitive? How can I make it a game? How can I make it a reoccurring thing that they get used to, and you can kind of program that into their behavior? How can you do that related to hand washing? So that could be, like I said, a competitive thing, or it could be, every hour you go and do it, and there's a fun song that plays every hour that reminds them of it. Whatever you come up with, try to get those habits to where they're doing that automatically and you're not staying on top of them all the time, because you're going to have enough to remember and keep track of as it is. Try to train them so they can train each other. Same thing with using bathroom or common space areas, just healthy habits, washing your hands after every time you go to the bathroom, which we try to encourage anyway. Try to teach kids to not touch their face or mouth, which, when I read that the first time, I kind of laughed, because certain age brackets, that's impossible. But the ones that you can teach and maybe make a game out of it or a competitive thing with that as well, about not touching your face and sneezing into a Kleenex or something like that as well. They recommend not brushing teeth during class if that's something you have wrapped up into your program already. All your personal items kept in separate areas or a separate cubby. Bedding sheets and things like that, make it to where it can be easily washed. They recommend on here should be washed weekly, and discourage use from other children using the same type of bedding or blankets. If you have arrival procedures, so if everybody kind of comes at the same time and drops kids off based on their parents' work schedules, how can you stagger that? How can you have multiple entrances to where you're dropping them off in different areas? I know when I've had my children in daycare, it was kind of staggered, and there was multiple entrances you could use, and parents had different start and stop times, so it sort of worked out. It just depends on how many kids and parents you have arriving, but it's something to maybe try to work out a stricter schedule with parents when they drop kids off. And also through here is just how can you limit the interactions? So when they drop kids off, maybe you can come out and greet them outside rather than them coming inside and signing them in and signing them out. Can you do that electronically as far as signing them in and out? So try to limit the interactions where they're going in and using spaces or using high touch areas. They talk about that throughout this guidance. Where can you install hand sanitizer where it's easy? So right when you come into the main entrance, maybe you can install some hand sanitizer right at the entrance and right when you leave, because it'll encourage people to use it and safe practices. See if I missed anything in this area. So health screenings, everybody has a little bit different strategy. Like when I go to the gym now, they do a temperature screening. And that's something they recommend related to health screening specific to child care programs. This is one of the few where they are explicit with this, sort of similar with masks, as far as doing that health screening with a no-touch thermometer. So if you see this area, monitor staff take children's temperature each morning with a no-touch thermometer. They talk about procedures if you don't have a no-touch thermometer as far as sanitizing that, but they explicitly call that out in here when you're doing drop-off in the mornings or whenever it is during the day. Obviously, some of this is monitoring kids throughout the day, which I'm sure you do already as far as illness or if they're not feeling good, making contact with parents and setting up pickup times if that's appropriate. It's the same thing with this. You're monitoring that throughout the day. Establish those procedures as far as and leveraging some of your existing procedures as if they do have to come and get them, if they do get a fever throughout the day, who is going to come pick them up? Where are they going to stay until they're going to get picked up? How is that area going to get sanitized after they get picked up? Thinking about this and wrapping that up into your plan. Let's see here. So Janet, you asked if there's a list of businesses that are mandated to do screenings. Essentially, every business has a similar requirement to do pre-screenings for staff, customers. There's specific requirements exactly related to that. There are a few that are specific to saying you have to take people's temperatures related to those screenings. So the childcare arena are the only ones that I've seen that no touch thermometer explicit call out in there. Everything else has been more general as far as pre-screening for basic symptoms. If you see people with fever, dry coughs, things like that, it is very specific for childcare. It is not that specific for summer camps, Janet, as you put in there. So coronavirus symptoms, they go over here. If you haven't seen them before, I'm sure everybody has seen it in some way, shape, or form, whether through the news or online. As I mentioned earlier, they recommend children to remain as small as groups as possible. A lot of this is going to depend on your setup. Again, if you only have 2 to 3 kids or you have over 10, as far as how can you separate them into smaller groups? Because if one of them gets sick and it infects an area or infects a group, it's much easier to manage it as a business and just improve the health of everybody and all the kids that use your facilities if it's a smaller group. You know, if somebody were to unfortunately get sick and was only around 1 or 2 people, it'd be easier to make contact and do contact tracing with those individuals, as well as sanitize those general areas, be able to silo the timeframes of when they used areas. It may make the difference of other people being infected or have a potential of being infected, and also your business being open, because if it spreads throughout your entire staff or the children, it's going to go from being open to not open. So it's something to keep in mind to try to keep smaller groups where possible. They mentioned keeping the same children with the same teacher, if at all possible. It's that same exact approach. Joe asked if there is a maximum number of kids in a facility. There's no call out that I've seen in these guidelines specific to limiting capacity. A lot of this is going to be driven by your facilities and how you're going to be able to maintain physical distancing and sanitation throughout the day. I hate saying that because it's super gray by me saying that, but there is no call out specific to that. Like movie theaters and churches and things like that have a 25% occupancy or 100-person cap. There's nothing that specific to childcare.
Actually, there is, Craig.
Where's it at? Where's it at, Janet?
I put the link here for the pin from the state CDSS. It's 10, unless the county says stricter than that. It's 10 children per group.
Okay.
Depending on the age of the group. For infants, it's 6.
Okay. Thank you for that, Janet. I didn't know that. And it doesn't say that anywhere in the guidance.
So. On page 13 of this pin that I just posted a link to.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's see here. We'll capture that in our notes so we can get that into our FAQs. Okay. As we work through, Janet, did you see if that included staff in that link or not? Maybe Janet, if you could look through that and report back.
Yes, it does. It has the staffing ratios also in those charts. It should be 1 to 10 instead of 1 to 12 as it is in regular licensing for like preschoolers.
Okay.
1 to 6 for infants.
Okay. So classroom space and physical distancing, a lot of this is just how you're going to wrap this into your plan, as I mentioned earlier. So if you have groups of tables or certain areas where you have activities that don't basically support the physical distancing of 6 feet, how can you rearrange those? Whether that's moving them around inside the building, or can you move some outside and take advantage of the time of year we're at right now? How can you separate different play areas, different toy areas, outdoor play areas or equipment? How can you separate those to where it'll encourage just naturally the 6-foot separation? They talk a little bit about that in more specific through this guidelines. They talk about opportunities for individual play, maybe keeping the toys out and taking some away that encourage where kids play by themselves. I know naturally they kind of gravitate towards each other, but it's just something to think about in your plan. Stagger indoor and outdoor play. So you can kind of flip-flop and let them use different areas, and while they wash their hands in between going from indoor to outdoor, that's time your staff could sanitize those areas. So try to make that to your benefit, to where you, similar to staggering drop-off and pickup times, staggering play times and different activities for what you're doing. Whether that's them eating, them napping, anything like that, you can stagger, will help benefit that. Meal times. So same thing, spread tables out to where it encourages physical distancing when you have meal times, and staggering that when possible. Hand washing before and after meals. Do not allow staff or children to touch each other's food or share food. That can be challenging at times, as I know they like to swap and trade, but trying to educate them on that and encouraging that distance between, to where they will hopefully keep a little bit more of that distance. And the same thing for this is, this time of year, try to leverage the use of outdoor eating times, or have outdoor in combination with indoor as well, to where you can stagger that. They have several other resources in here at the very end. I think the one is the link that Janet talked about a little bit earlier, is at the end of this document. That is, let me stop screen sharing here real quick. So does anybody have any general questions related to childcare, or anything specific to that we went over or that we didn't answer? Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share our FAQs and go through it. Some of them are specific to day camps and some of these other areas, but it answers kind of the global area itself. Janet, did you say you had a question?
Yes, please. I'm running into children who go to different care centers during the week. So part-time at one and part-time at another, which makes our circle of influence much, much bigger. I'm just wondering if the county has considered putting out any guidance on that. If we're keeping the groups small, but then the children have 20 other contacts during the week, it's silly, really. It feels silly.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes against a lot of these recommendations in general. The problem with saying no to that is it might not be possible, just based on the amount of available daycares or the availability of parents and things like that. I don't anticipate the county probably coming out with any specific guidance or more restrictive standards to that, because that has not been our kind of philosophy throughout this whole thing. We've gone exactly with what the state says. With that said, I think if that's happening, that's something maybe you need to reach out to that. Well, one, recommend that it doesn't happen, and if it's not possible, reach out to that other business and see if you guys can wrap that up into your plans, because do they have multiple kids that are going back and forth between both your facilities? Can you keep those kids together at each facility in different groups to where even though they're going back and forth, can they stay in those groups regardless of the location?
This question going forward for our main school too, because of aftercare. If the children are separate all day, and then can they go to aftercare? It's big questions on how children mingle.
Maybe we'll kick that around just for some general guidance, and I can talk to the health officer a little bit more and see if there's something that I'm not aware of related to recommendations for that. It's kind of challenging. That's one of the challenging issues, because it's just it may not be an option to not do it. And if you have to do it, what are some of the better safe practices related to that?
And that's the other questions. I have students that come all week, and then I have students that just come 2 days. So those children are bridging the gaps between the exposure gap between the two groups. They can't be like a standalone 10 children, because half those kids come with the other half of the kids on the other days. So there's always this cross-contamination.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing is just about kids in general, is you can train them and teach them all you want, and it's hard to keep them from cross-contaminating regardless if you have them in groups. The only thing you can do is try to plan for it and try to separate them in different groups or stagger activities, increase the disinfecting of the areas that those kids are using. Those are the only things you really can do during that time, if that's happening, in my mind.
And my last question is, what is the consequence if we don't follow the mandates?
So the consequence is, well, one, for yourself. I mean, that's the biggest thing.
Guilt. Yes. We don't want anyone to get sick.
I mean, you're in control of your own misery in a lot of ways, and you're in control of everybody being safe. Ultimately what that is if it gets contracted and people get sick in your business, that's a difference of doing business and not doing business. Plus, you're just doing a detriment to the community and the people you're serving anyway by not having these safe practices. That's the practical side of this, and we hope people take that seriously throughout this process. With that said, if somebody files a formal complaint with the county, we will follow up with you. And if those aren't being followed explicitly for the guidance and somebody's just completely ignoring the requirements, there are enforcement actions we can take. So right now, we're not wanting to do that. We've taken an educational approach, but we do have tools to issue citations, basically closure of businesses, things like that. We haven't done that yet because most people, what we've seen, have been taking it serious for the most part. And hopefully we don't have to throughout this whole thing.
I just want the county to be aware that some businesses are being affected negatively because they're willing to say they will follow the regulations, while other businesses are publicly saying they won't. And so we're losing business to other businesses because they're willing to make it easier on people. It's just part of the bigger picture of how we're operating in this time.
Yeah, and this is in every sector, this is happening to a certain degree. We've dealt with this with a lot with gyms over the last few weeks. What I would say is, if you're hearing that and you know that is occurring, send in a complaint. It's all anonymous. As far as if you're the complainant, we don't tell anybody who you are and who you report, and we'll follow up with that business. Because maybe a little bit of outreach and education and us showing them that it is serious, maybe that'll change for their perspective and how they're handling their business. I heard, can preschools or day camps come to the 49er Fun Park? Technically, based on the guidance, because family entertainment centers and childcare programs are allowed to operate, to me, you can, based on those guidance. Again, both businesses are going to have to follow both of their guidelines. 49er Fun Park has their own set of rules based on family entertainment centers that aren't drastically different from what we've already talked about. And I can go over those specifics if there's general questions or specific questions for that. But yeah, In my mind, you can, as long as you have safe practices. Are you going to try to keep them in smaller groups? Or are you going to take them at different times? Are you going to have them doing different activities, like a small group with arcades, small group with miniature golf? So how are you going to meet the intent to keep everybody safe is the main thing. Let me share the FAQ.
Hello, just want to let everyone know we're going to be bringing everyone back to the main room in about 2 minutes.
That's good, Josh, because we lost our leader.
Okay, let's see, this is group 4. You lost Craig.
Yeah, he froze like 1 minute ago, 2 minutes ago.
The Zoom monsters got him. Okay,
Yes.
I'll send Molly over. She's the Assistant County Executive Officer to see if you guys have any wrap-up questions before we pull you back.
Hello, everyone. I heard you lost Craig.
We did.
What'd you do to him? Just kidding. All right, well, he may have had internet issues and got bumped out of Zoom, but I'm happy to try to finish up with any questions that you have. And then I know we're getting low on our time and we're going to be moved back to our main group here shortly. So,
Molly, I had a quick question. For teachers at our summer camp programs or that kind of thing, are face shields okay to offer these instructors versus face mask? Or if you're an instructor at a day camp, it really needs to be a face mask?
yeah, my understanding is that face shields are not a replacement for a face covering. So the purpose of the face covering is to keep you from breathing and sending droplets out towards other people. The face shield is more protective of what might be coming at you. It doesn't really protect what's coming out of you.
Yeah.
And so that's where the face coverings are really the baseline. And then as you'll see in like some settings where people have to be close together, you see an additional face shield, but that's really to protect the worker, not to protect the.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. No, that's good to know that clarification because we've been wondering.
Yeah, and you know, we can follow up with environmental health on that because you know, if the face shield is long enough, I was just remembering that she was talking, Amy Arani was talking about a restaurant that wanted their people to wear a face shield so that they don't look like these scary people behind masks, which I was imagining.
5 back, 6 is back. Let's see. Well, we probably are pretty close to having everybody back. We may have had a few folks drop out. So I want to welcome you back. Thank you for being here. And at this point, we're all back together. So there is a chance that you were in a breakout room and that was valuable information to you, but you also really wanted some information about another group, and you can only be in one place at one time. So this is a time to, in the chat, list any question you may still have that wasn't answered, or that you weren't in that room so you didn't get to ask it, or something you need. What's a resource you need that will help you to open your business? So this is the time we'd ask you to put it in the chat, and then we're going to ask our facilitators to respond to that or to put resources into the information. So I am inviting you to go ahead and put down in the chat what remaining questions that you have, or what do you need. And sometimes you might need something, and one of you has an answer for somebody else who's here, a resource in terms of the PPE, or just a question that one of the folks here could answer as well. So let's see if anybody has, I see 8 new messages. So let me see what's coming up here. Okay, so one of the messages here is 72-hour downtime. Can the cleaner be in the middle of that in terms